Thank you, Bill. That was very brotherly-like. Welcome, everybody. I'm Patrick Moore, for those who don't know, and I'm a painter and a photographer. And I am delighted that you're here and honored, so thank you. Um, Before we start, I'd like to thank Shumei International for providing, Shumei International Institute for providing this space and for coordinating these symposia and making this whole program available. So thank you to them. In particular, I'd like to thank Deanna Wilfong, who is currently running it. And she does such an excellent job and makes it so smooth for the artist. And she's just wonderful, really well organized. And last but not least, I got to thank Bill Elzy, because he doesn't remember, but I didn't just roll in. The first day I was in Crestone, I stopped off at the liquor store for whiskey, no, for a pack of cigarettes. And Robin was there, and she said, "Oh, you're a photographer? I have a photographer friend." And before I could say anything, she picked up the phone and said, "Bill, there's a photographer here. Can you see him right now?" And Bill was busy, and so he said, "No, but I can see him tomorrow morning." So Bill was actually the second person I met when I first came here. And he was very generous and very open with his studio and photography and everything. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciate that Bill ran this program. It's his brainchild, and he ran it for the first 11 years solo and has really kept it going and alive, and it's a beautiful program. And as long as we've known each other, he's been trying to get me here, and I just said no for various reasons, and he never gave up. So thanks to Bill Elzy and Deanna Wilfong, I'm here today, okay? All right, let's jump in, okay? I hear voices sometimes. I sense presences all the time. I see auras frequently, and I always have silent conversations with everything, often with people. I was a little reluctant to make these revelations to you guys, but they're true and they're relevant to my art. And the more I thought about it, I realized who my audience would be and where we live. And rather than it being scoffed at or ridiculed, it's recognized and accepted and honored. And I think that's pretty darn awesome for our community. So cheers to us. So here we go. Ever since I was a little boy, I remember, very young little boy, having these lengthy periods when I would just be in nature by myself. And I would have conversations with the rocks and conversations with the plants, conversations with a patch of ground. And I often saw them glowing. And as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And as a grown man, I still don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I didn't realize that not everybody perceived the world the same way I did until, you start growing up and going off to school and stuff like that. I don't just see them. I have silent communication with them, even with dirt. And I saw an aura of dirt when I was a little boy, and I thought that, well, that's not a tree. Why does it have an aura? And I saw a rock, and it had an aura. And I said, well, that's not alive. Why does it have an aura? And I, as a small child, I don't have explanations for those things, but I realize that everything does. Everything has its aura. And have you ever noticed that young children, have a much more fluid perception of existence than we do? everything has a personality to them, whether it's their house or their doll or their room or whatever, has a personality as though it's alive and talking to them. And I think that's how we're born into the world until we start going to school and stuff like that. Okay? For my paintings, I have three inspirational sources that I'm aware of. One of them is representational, where I see something beautiful in the world and I want to represent it. I think it'll make a beautiful painting. The second one is intuitional, where I sit before a blank canvas and the painting just comes forth. I have no preconception or thought or idea of what's going to happen. And then the third one is insightful. It's where I've had a flash of insight and I want to put it on canvas. All three of those sources of inspiration have a common denominator. They all talk to me when I paint them. This is Field of Dreams. This is an example of representational. It's not dreams that we have at nighttime. It's not baseball dreams necessarily, you know. This painting is based on a photograph that I took years ago on my journeys, perhaps in Utah or Nevada, but not here in Colorado. And what caught my eye at the time was the sun breaking through the clouds. Over the course of painting this for 3 months, this painting talked to me. And for a good portion of the time, it was optimism. That's all I knew. It was optimism. And I'll tell you where the name Field of Dreams came from in a second. But the optimism is the dreams, and the optimism are all these little seeds that all have potential. They're future dreams. They're kind of like our dreams and our wishes of something that we want to accomplish. And then the sun represents the enthusiasm coming from, past or whatever's weighing us down and shining brightly over our dreams and into the lightness of the future. She is a strong feminine energy, she tells me. And the reason is because this is filled with dreams like a mother has for a newborn child. The wishes and the dreams and the beauty that child is going to have in their lives. So most of the time that I was painting it, it was called optimism. And then the photograph that it's based on has lens flares in it. And I said, add those. So I added those. And the minute I started painting those, she said, I'm a field of dreams. That's wild. Lens flares used to be not desirable in photographs, but they are now, more or less. But I've never seen them in a painting. And so I said, yeah, put them in there. The lens flares represent the unseen magic that is there, whether we see it or not. I visually, with my eyes, could not see those in the field, but my camera refracted the existing light that's there and showed up. The rainbow over here is our version of that. We can see it in the sky, but it's really the water droplets reflecting light passing through it. So all of that is unseen magic that's there. Okay? This painting right here is Cesare, which is just the Italian word for splash. And it's a representation of intuitional inspiration. I literally did not have any expectations with that painting. I just sat there with a small canvas and started putting paint on canvas. And usually in intuitional paintings, I don't know what it is until I'm finished, until it's completely finished. And I saw the splash, and the painting graciously let me enhance the splash a little bit. But that's how a lot of them are. And there's some prints of some intuitional paintings back here. Okay? The third kind is insightful, which is that center painting over there that is called unnameable, or that which is unnameable. It has a little bit longer of a story, and so let me tell you about it. Flash forward to when I was practicing law, which I did for 28 years. My first year, I had this sense that I was surfing on the surface of reality in life and not diving into the depths and fullness of the ocean of life. A few years after that first year, I started some practices. I did what I called I want to see only beauty, and I started the practice of deathbed meditation. I want to see only beauty in the world is a line from a novel written by Pearl Buck in 1932. Pearl Buck was the daughter of missionaries to China during 1910, 1920, and in 1930, the wife of a ambassador to China from the United States when she grew up. In 1932, she wrote this book called The Good Earth. In 1938, they made a movie out of it. Somewhere in between those two, she won the Pulitzer Prize in Literature for that book. It's about a peasant Chinese family in that period, 3 sons, 1 daughter, and a mother, who start out as peasants. And it's basically the talents story, you know, from the Bible about how you're given talents and you either hide them or squander them or use them. That's basically what it is. I remember watching that movie with my mother as a little boy. And there's one scene in there where they're in the dusty courtyard, poor still, and the little boy says, "Mother, why is Wan Li the way she is?" And she was mentally challenged. She had had an injury or something as an infant. And the mother said, "Your sister sees only beauty. Your sister sees only beauty." And that was her explanation for that. So for some reason, that line stuck in my head as a little boy. So when I was practicing law, I said, I want to see only beauty. And then the other practice that I started was going to a dark place and meditating in silence and imagining myself on my deathbed and what would be important to me transitioning from this existence to the next. And that has a really great way of focusing on what we do. So anyway, I had those 2 practices for a long time, and 8 years after I started those practices, I was still practicing law. I could go into the lobby of my building, which was a big black granite lobby, as long as a football field with banks of elevators and lawyers. And I walked up to the lobby, and instantly, every person, this was early in the morning, every person was glowing blue. I saw their auras. And immediately that snapped in and said, that's seeing only beauty. Because each one of those persons represented their own version of eternity and beauty in the universe. And I said, because I didn't have a concept of what seeing only beauty would be like. So that happened. The other thing that happened with the meditation practice was I realized that nothing that I was doing was of value for me to take with me in my next version, whatever that is. So flash forward more years. I continued to practice law. Then I started having these visions. I saw a big black monolith coming out of the ground. Didn't have a clue what it was. And then I started seeing myself sitting on the edge of a cliff underneath an oak tree, looking out into the vast distance of the desert. Didn't have a clue what that was. So then I'm on a business trip from Houston to San Francisco, flying, and I look down, and down there, out of the ground, is this big, giant black monolith. So when I finished my business, I returned home, and I looked up to see what that was in that route. And it was Shiprock, New Mexico. It was the rock coming out of the earth. So then I started having the vision about sitting under an oak tree in the desert. I go, I don't know any oak trees in the deserts, you know? So I looked that up, oak trees in desert. And there was one image that was an old U.S. satellite image of it was like an infrared image where they could tell what used to be there. and there used to be a bullseye ring of old oaks. None of them were there anymore, in the desert around Shiprock. And so I said, oh, wow. So at some point in my practice, I decided that I was going to change my life and go deeper into it. And so for 3 years, I wrapped up my practice and all my personal business as well. And I decided I was going to go, and I did. The best thing I've ever done in my life. So I head out. I know I got to go to Shiprock, so I get in that little truck that Bill described earlier, and I head to Shiprock. And the first thing, I don't have a clue what to do, so I go to the Navajo Nation Police. They have their own police force, and so I talked to the chief there, and I told him that I wanted to spend 100 days in their desert near Shiprock. I came up with 100 days because I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to say, oh, okay, I've done this, fine. So 100 days. So I told the police chief what I was going to do. He said, that's fine with us. You have to ask the chief, the tribal chief. Apparently, the Navajo Nation is divided into 4 chapter houses. And the one for Shiprock was run by a chief named Chili Yazi. So I went to the chapter house, and these chapter houses are big round places, like silos, with desks all around them inside where people are doing administrative things. And I said, I'm here to see Chief Yazi. And they looked at me peculiarly, and they said, well, he's not here right now. You'll have to wait for him. You can wait there. So I waited for 3 days there. But it didn't feel inconvenient or anything. I just knew I had to wait for 3 days. So I did. I would leave and go, take care of business. So then finally, one of the ladies came up to me and they said, Chief Yazi will see you now. So I went into a conference room and I said, can I close the door? And he said, no. He was a man about this tall with a braid about this long, missing an arm. And he was full-blooded Navajo. And he was not favorable to non-Navajos. But I told him what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it, and that I'd like to do it near Shiprock. He said, well, that's sacred land. You can't do that. But the people who own the land around it are the Ben family. You can go find them and ask them permission for it. And I said, okay, thank you, Chief, and he didn't shake my hand. So then I followed his directions to go find the Ben family, which was 40 miles into the desert. And I drove up after 3 days of searching into the back of a bluff, and there was a single Pueblo house and a brown Cadillac and about a dozen pit bull dogs and other that running around, and a beautiful Navajo woman sitting on the trunk of that Cadillac on the phone. So I got out of the truck and I said, I'm Patrick Moore. Chief Yazi sent me and said I should talk to your mother, Bertha. And she looked at me in the strangest way. She goes, okay, come on inside. And she had a little pink teddy on. Do y'all know what that is? A little sleeping. She said, wait here, let me go put something else on. So she went and put something else on, came out in a little yellow teddy. Same one, yellow. So I told her what I wanted to do and all that. She said, well, my mother's traveling. She's not available. But you should talk to my Uncle Joe Ben. He's the medicine man for our chapter. And I said, okay, let's do that. So the next day she introduced me to Joe Ben. And I told him, and he completely understood. 1, he was the medicine man for that chapter of the tribe. And 2, he was an artist. He did sand art, meticulous sand art. And he had shown in New York and all that and returned to the reservation to fulfill, his obligation to them. So the next day, Joe says, come to my house. I go to his house. He drives me out to their ancestral land, which is about 40 or 50 miles into the desert from Shiprock. He said, you really can't be there because there's vandals there and it's sacred land and you really can't use it for that. So he took me to where their land is and he said, okay, let's go for a hike. So we got out and we hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked for 10 hours. We hiked up this ridge, and then after 10 hours, we were coming down. And right as we were coming down from that ridge, there was an oak tree here, a single oak tree. And he said, and there's your oak tree. and right under it was an Anasazi fire circle. He said, the Navajo don't touch those things because they believe in spirits. And they think that the only bad spirits remain here and all the good ones go. And he said, but you're welcome to use it. I said, okay. And so we walked, and that tree was the exact, and that ridge was exactly what I had been seeing. So we go back to his house. I go back to my hotel in Farmington, a long ways away. And he says, meet me here tomorrow, and I'll take you back out there, and you can start your journey. And I said, okay. So I go to his house the next morning, and he says, you need to go without me. And I said, well, Joe, I'm not sure I can find the way 40 miles into the desert. He said, you will know. And I was terrified, and he was right. I did know. I knew exactly where to go. So I went there and set myself up and, started my meditation. The whole reason that I had decided to go to the desert in the first place and leave what I now call the outside world was because I wanted to empty myself of all the programming that I had received. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. It's all positive programming. It's just what our culture believed and what my loving mother knew and believed and all that. But it wasn't revealing to me the depth of my existence. So I wanted to empty of all that. So my goal was, I had visualized being in a box in the dark cosmos and jumping out of it. I had no concept of what might be present or what I might be jumping into or anything like that. I also wanted to go exactly where Jesus and Buddha had gone because I had always figured they were very wise teachers and they had seen something that not all of us see on a regular basis. So I asked for those things. I want to go where they went and what they saw or knew, and I wanted to jump out of my current existence into the cosmos. And that's what happened. These are my journals from that 100 days in the desert. Nobody has ever seen them, but I'm going to read to you from them. So on day 35 is the significant day. But on day 33, I think, 31, it says, deep in emptiness, I knew these days would come. They are the post-romantic beauty of this journey. They are the quitting days when we would quit. That's why I decided on 100 days for this journey, to stick to it through these days, to fully cherish all aspects of growth and being. Myself, as it has known existence, is rebelling. My spirit is persistent and strong, small, steady steps. So my ego was resisting being taken out of control. I nicknamed him, by the way, his nickname is Ogie. So anytime Ogie tried to exert his control and decide what everything was, I would say, be quiet, Ogie. I walked, this is still day 31, walked and thought all day. This period is really just like a Greco-Roman wrestling match with oneself, both mentally, physically, intellectually. It's sweaty, dirty, aggressive, strong, and it really is the mind and everything that we have fighting to maintain its place. It was throwing fits, struggling with all its might for me to keep it where it belongs, where it believes it belongs. I can see these struggles, but who or what is I seeing these struggles? So that was day 31. 32 was wrestling, another full day of wrestling. 33, top of the ridge that I described to you, decided that since I am still wrestling with myself, I could not and did not want to just shuffle around on my feet around camp again all day. So I decided to go visit all the ancient junipers up on the ridge. And be with them and look off every scary edge I passed. The junipers, ancient ones, are at the very precipice of the ridge. So going from one to the other, you have to literally teeter on the edge. There are about 20 trees up there. I took Oliver and Nikki, which were my dogs, my companions during this journey, and my good friend Fear. Fear had been with me pretty much all my life. And I was determined not to let that control. He had such a great time jolting me all along the ridge. He even jolted me when Nikki and Oliver were in danger at the edge of a rock. We spent the entire day up there. I did things with Fear pulling at my vest just to scare him, scare me too. But the more he jolted me, the further I went. Truthfully, he was really jolting me with electricity in the heart, in the lungs, in the feet. No kidding. The ancient ones, the Jupiters, welcomed our presence. They let me know that no humans ever come to see them anymore or admire them. They shared with me the time that humans did come and live among them and love them. They missed their Navajo and their Anasazi. These were ancient trees. They were so ancient, they're like, what do they call the pine cone trees? They're bristlecone pines. So ancient that just a little bit is growing, but the tree is still there. These were like that, but junipers. On the way down, I felt like a mountain lion. I leapt from ridge to ridge, drop-offs to lower rocks, running horizontally. It was exhilarating, strong, and freeing. I had to stop to carry Oliver, the little dog, several large passes because he's too little, but Nikki would just find her way for a safe passage for herself. So that was day 33, and then day 34 was around and around in my head, in my heart, in my soul, in me. Seems like winds blowing around inside, carrying all the thoughts, feelings, intuitions, mixing them up, concealing everything in whirlwind after whirlwind. So I remember this day distinctly. I had taken the power away from my mind and my ego, and it was rebelling. It wanted a grasp. It wanted to go back to figuring things out and tell me what things were about, but I wouldn't let it. I walked peacefully with my hands clasped behind me all day, did nothing, looked down at my path and steps, took small steps, felt like a camel in the desert in a sandstorm. Had no clear thoughts because everything was so ethereal, nothing to hold on to, thoughts and feelings left before I had time to think about them. They were swirling by. I went to calmness and I permitted the whirlwinds to rage. So I was just calm in the midst of the whirlwind. And then this is day 35. And this is what this painting's about. I spent the night with it. All that is, has been, an eternity. It revealed all sorts of existence, representing them in a single moment, no time. Then it showed me itself. It truly represents itself as the void, huge, no time, no thing, just presence, but not empty as described, so full that it looks like a void. In that instance, it said, "You are us. You are me. You have come to be, with a capital B, in all eternity. Rejoice. Be on our behalf. Be." It showed me the essence of being. It showed me how. First, it showed me what being is not. Physicality, thoughts, emotions, concepts. Then how to be, to bloom like flowers, to rejoice, to have curiosity. And it showed me different beings on different planets who were in pureness of being. I felt the void, and it was curious. Many have characterized awakening as the innocence of a child, the consciousness of the void, the no thing, the one or the oneness. We are that, and we are emissaries of that. We are not separate, yet we are unique in our eternity. It really is as though the void has had children and set us free. In the moment when it showed me all sorts of existence, I saw beings, none human, who were being. I saw them being, blooming, cherishing all. They and it cherished me. They had eyes and they looked at me and communicated joyousness and cherishment to me through their eyes. They were a sample, an example, a glimpse of beings who are aware, awake, conscious of being, and rejoicing in it. And that's that. And so I stayed in the desert for the rest of the 65 days, figuring out how to be a human being with that understanding. And it was pure joy. I wanted to stay there forever. But I didn't. I came home. On the 100th day, a matter of fact, we had had 4 feet of snow for that week. And I was just out figuring out if I could find some wood to burn and warm up. And I heard, Patrick. And I didn't have a clue. Well, it was Joe Ben and his sons coming to get me because my tent was buried under snow, but still up. And okay. And but they were expecting another big snowstorm. So they came to get me. It just so happens that it really was on the 100th day. I guess he remembered that I was going to be there for 100 days. So I left. Okay. During that journey, I didn't have any electronics or anything, so I kept a written journals and visual journals where I painted pictures. So I painted 88 pictures during that 100 days. I was committed to paint every day, but some of them just didn't happen. Then I went straight back to Houston, and in Houston, I had a show, and it sold out. And then I couldn't wait to get back into the wilderness. So then I spent two more years, maybe 3 more years in the wilderness, and I came back. This time I could take my stuff. I could take my paintbrushes and when I painted in the desert, I made all my paintbrushes out of yucca spines, and I did a lot of finger painting, which you can see in some of these prints during the reception. And but then I went back into the wilderness. I took a camera and a phone and all those kinds of things, and I enjoyed it so much. I loved being out there. I stayed at the top of mountains in solitude or in the depths of deserts in solitude. I lived in the redwood forest of Northern California for a little over 6 months, and it was just awesome. I just loved it. I felt like that little child that had been in communion with all of the things that I saw, and conversations and auras and oneness with all of nature. And then I came back to Houston to have another show. And during that time, I was staying with my brother Johnny, who's here today. Thank you, brother. And the day before the show at Insight Time, this was 2 years after this, or 3 years after this, a voice woke me up and said, "Go to Crestone." And I said, "What?" in my head. And it said, "Go to Crestone," a little bit louder. So I got out of bed and I Googled Crestone, and this community arose. I said, okay, I can do that. So once I was back on the road, I came to Crestone. I could only stay for 9 days that first time because I had already made a commitment to go to Lake Tahoe. So I set up in North Crestone Campground, and I set up on campground number 6, and I started painting. And this painting I painted the first 2 days that I was here, and it's called Crestone's Light. The first thing that I noticed when I arrived was how the light is so much different here. And I didn't realize that the light in the people was also different here. And then these photos I also took on that same first week. But here's the Crestone's Light, Crestone's Jewels, and Aspen. And I was doing this, you can see there's a trait here, and it's capturing that light, that unique light. These are stones at the bottom of North Crestone Creek. But look how beautiful they are. And the tree, the aspen tree, is just glowing forward out of the somewhat darker forest and just popping at you. And that's what I noticed when I first got here. And then I was here for 9 days up in the campground, and every day for 9 days, somebody came and invited me to dinner. that night. And I thought, that's really strange. That's odd. That's awesome. So then I left, and then I came back. Okay? And here I am. And thank you for listening. So I strongly believe in this program that Shumei sponsors for us. So 10% of all sales for the duration of the show are being donated to Shumei for the continuation of their art programs, and particularly this Symposium program. So please, feel free to buy. If you have any questions, oh, wait, the piece de resistance. This painting over here, the blue one, is called Singing with the Stars. And where that comes from is when I was a little bitty boy, 3 years old, we lived in Midland, Texas. And my mother used to take me out for a walk because the stars are bright and vibrant as they are here, no light pollution. So we were walking and she was holding my little hand, and all of a sudden, and I remember this distinctly, all of a sudden I stopped because I heard a whisper or an echo or something. So I looked up into the star and she stopped with me, and I just stared at the stars. And she was silent, and she was just waiting to see what was going on. Then I looked at her face looking down at me, and I said, "Mommy, I can't wait to go back and sing with the stars." And she looked at me with the most understanding face I've ever seen. And she said, "I know, son, I know." That moment has kept the magic alive my whole life, because I realized this person understands, this person knows, I'm not being weird, you know? And so, and after all, that's a great representation, because aren't we all singing with the stars right now? Yes, all. Uh-oh. All right. And then, so that's it. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed it. So now we're going to have the reception, and I'm going to be here answering any questions that you might have about the art. This piece right here is called Sunrise on Winter Skies. It's a perfect example of how beautiful the light is in our community. You know, the light coming from the sun is identical all over the planet. What changes is in the environment that it's striking against. And that's just gorgeous. I've never seen clouds like that before. So there's little details about everything here, and if you're interested, I'd be happy to explain it to you. Okay? All right. Enjoy. How was it? Okay. Thank you. Very nice, Patrick. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Huh? I know.